2021 Special Planning Commission meeting. If any member of the public would like to speak on an item or during public comment, which is for non-agenda items, please fill out a card and return that card to Ms. Rodeker. You may also be recognized by joining the meeting on Zoom video conferencing and raising your hand in the Zoom application. Members of the public may also comment on an item by sending an email to planning@rochesterhills.org prior to the discussion on the agenda item. All comments and questions will be limited to 3 minutes per person. All questions will be answered together after every person has had the opportunity to speak on the same agenda item. Ms. Gentry, will you take roll call, please?
Yes. Chairperson Bernabic?
Here.
Vice Chairperson Hooper?
Here.
Secretary Kaltsunis?
Here.
City Council Member and Commissioner Bowyer is excused.
Oh, she is excused?
Commissioner Detloff?
Here.
Commissioner Gaber?
Here.
Commissioner Neubauer?
Here.
Commissioner Struzik?
Here.
Commissioner Weaver?
Here.
We have a quorum. Approval of the minutes for the June 15th, 2021 regular meeting. Are there any comments or corrections?
Chairperson Bernabic, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Okay. Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Kalsunis, seconded by Mr. Hooper, for approval of the minutes from June 15th, 2021. Take a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. I don't have anything for communications tonight, so I will move on to public comment, which is for non-agenda items. So I will open up public comment. And I do not have any cards, and I don't see any hands, so I will close public comment. Move on to new business. Request for a tree removal permit, City File Number 21-004, for the removal and replacement of as many as 103 trees for Grace Senior Living, an 83-unit, two-story senior living facility on 2.8 acres on the south side of Walton, east of Adams, zoned RM1 multiple family residential, parcel number 15-17-103-002. JBD Grace Rochester LLC is the applicant. Will the applicants come up to the front table, please? And if you'd like to introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, you have to push on.
Hi, it's
We only have two.
J.B. Davies on behalf of the applicant.
Okay.
Mark Kinser. David Fulkerson.
And I am Scott Bell with Lapham Associates, the engineer that prepared the site plan.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kapelinski, will you do the staff report, please?
Yes. The applicant is proposing to construct, in this case, an 83-unit senior living facility. This is on the south side of Walton, east of Adams. The parcel is currently zoned RM1 multiple family, which does allow senior living facilities as a principal permitted use. The applicant is requesting site plan approval and approval of the tree removal permit this evening. The plan is generally in compliance with ordinance requirements. There are a few minor items to be addressed in future staff reviews. If you'll notice, an amended fire protection plan has been included as an addendum to the plan set. That was made to address fire comments that were sent to the applicant midway through the review process. Tree removals are required, and the applicant does intend to pay into the tree fund for those. I would also like to note that the applicant has met with their adjacent property owners. That's the condos to the west and south and the church property to the east. All review comments from staff are minor in nature at this point, and all reviews are recommending approval. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And would the applicant like to start their presentation?
Thank you. Just a few brief comments. I'd just like to thank Kristen and all the departments for their hard work in getting our reviews done and more importantly for their approvals. Thank you. Thank you, Planning Commission, for this special date. I know everyone has families. It's summer. There's lots to do. We appreciate you accommodating us, keeping us on schedule. Very excited about this deal. I have a long history in Rochester Hills. I've done 5 deals back in the days with Ed Anzik and Deb Melhouse. You might remember those names, old friends. Did the northeast corner of Crooks and Auburn Road, did 441 South Livernois, just south of Crittenden. So I've been here a long time, and it's just been a really great place to do business, and so thank you. So we're very excited about this new deal. It's an assisted living facility. I've got 2 great operating partners. I'd like to introduce you to Dave Fulkerson, who's just going to make a few comments on what Grace Senior Living is about, and then we'll turn it over to our design professionals.
Is it okay if I pick this up?
Sure.
This is fine. So I got into senior living. I lived with my mother, who took care of my grandfather for 5 years. And it got to the point where it consumed her life. And I said, Mom, you can't do this anymore. He had had a stroke, lost his ability to talk. So regrettably now, looking back, it didn't turn out that well, but we moved him into a community. And I'll never forget the day we moved him. We have a banister with a ball on top of it by our front door, and we're moving him out, and he couldn't speak. So my 86-year-old grandfather grabbed a hold of that banister ball, and I'll never forget his arm shaking and holding on. And my 6'3", 225-pound father pried his fingers off of that ball. And we were bawling. It was just one of the saddest days of our lives. And he was a great man. He came from Appleton, Wisconsin, for money a dentist gave him and 3 other kids to come work in the auto industry. He was the only one that paid the dentist back. Just gives you, he had a great sense of duty early on. So when I say we're raising the bar in senior living, it's not just words. Kristen, if you could put up a couple of pictures. In our first community, Mark and I opened in 2019. One of the ladies had 3 daughters, Carolyn, Marilyn, and Geraldine, and a granddaughter. And they all got our logo tattooed on their arm. Show the other picture of one of the daughters. And the signature is the last letter their mother sent them from Florida before they moved her to live with us. So that blew us away. But that inspires us to want everyone to get a tattoo. And one last story, that it didn't just stop there. We get reviews all the time, and this one just came in June 21st from caring.com. My mother loves Grace. She was scared, and I can't see very good here to get my glasses out, pardon me. She was scared, and we were sad having to move our mother into an assisted living, but we saw a huge smile on her face the first time she saw the beautiful community. Then we tasted the food, which was like we're at a high-class restaurant. My mom loves the food. She loves the staff. The staff truly cares for my mother, and I couldn't be more happy with them. They run activities, and my mother has a quiet room to go relax to. We love Grace. So we plan on, if you approve us, to be a jewel in your community, where we hope once our reputation gets established, that every one of you that ever needs senior living will just know for sure that we got to go to Grace. So thank you for your time and listening.
Thank you.
Okay. I got control of the screen. Let's move this a little bit closer. I have a few, I think this is probably the best one to look at as far as, well. No, thanks. I didn't want to move. I just wanted to open it up. There it goes. Okay, just takes a minute. So we have this colored rendering of our site, basically. So as mentioned previously, there's I think it's 2.8 acre parcel of property. We have a 2-story building that will house 83 units of assisted living. Together with that, we have a parking area, a general parking area, covered entry. So as you pull in off of Walton, off the entrance here, you can go to a covered portico where you can drop people off, or you can park in the parking lot. We provided a service road around the entire building for a multitude of things. We need a fire lane around there. It provides for access for fire trucks and emergency vehicles. It also allows us to have some additional entry in the rear, a loading and unloading area. There aren't very many deliveries, and they're not very large vehicles, but foodstuffs will be delivered, things of that nature, as well as some employee parking on the back side of that service drive. We have all of our public utilities that we have available to us with water for fire suppression and fire hydrants, sanitary sewers right there. We've done our very best to try and preserve the trees on the property as best we can. We've met the requirements of the ordinance. We do have adjacent to the south of the parking lot in this area, a portion of the property that we're not going to disturb at all. We're going to preserve the trees. However, as part of our passive recreation requirements, we included a walking trail that would go through there to allow residents to maybe take a little walk. Most of these residents they're seniors, and they're in an assisted living because they are not able to necessarily get around that easily. So majority of the recreation with the residents will be in the interior with the two courtyards that we have. Those areas will be landscaped and totally enclosed, but we'll provide an area for the residents to get outside, have a gazebo. They can have meals and spend time outdoors there. One of the things, and that's kind of concluding where I'm at with this, I want to show some of the renderings here. Let me see if I can remember which one's which. This is a rendering of the building looking from Walton in the southwest towards the covered entry and the building. And one of the things that I'd like to ask the Planning Commission tonight, one of your requirements is with masonry material on the facade of a building. This building here shows oops, my mouse runs out. Boom, make it a little bigger. This shows a significant amount of brick along the front facade of the building. Our original plan, and I'll show that next. I think it's this one. Yes, this one. So this image here was our original design for the facade of the building, and it doesn't quite meet the masonry requirement. It's the upper portion of that building would be hardy board type siding, and that is we think that this is a better looking model, and we'd like to ask for the site plan, a deviation from our application, but to approve the site plan with this front facade. Just as another picture, a rendering that we did here is, this is from the northwest corner of the property looking southeast. So this would be, and this shows the brick facade as well on that front side that fronts on Walton, but that would be the back side of the building where where our service drive wraps around. So we think we have a really beautiful building proposed. We think it fits into your community. It's the unique thing about the assisted livings is from a planning perspective as a use, it's kind of a quasi-use. It's in between. It's residential, but it's institutional, but it's kind of commercial. It's difficult to put these buildings into a classification. We try and make them seem very homey. We like them to have a residential appearance so that it doesn't look like it's either a hotel or a hospital, for example. We want the residents to feel at home there. So I think we've gone great strides here to try and make a beautiful building that will fit into the neighborhood and fit into the surrounding area as well. And that is one of the things that we'd like to ask for is for the facade of the building, if the Planning Commission would please consider looking at that with the second rendering that had the siding, the masonry siding up on top. On that note, Todd, do you have anything to add? Todd Seidel, he's the architect that did the design of the building.
I think Scott gave a pretty good overview. It's the thing we're trying to point out is we wanted to maintain consistency, if we could, around all four sides of the building with the motif, and that the ordinance did dictate that you needed a certain percentage of masonry on the street side. And if need be, we could do the original design, but we felt that actually looks more cohesive as an overall complex with all sides consistent. And there is virtually a brick, the whole first floor level is completely brick around the entire perimeter. And we are using sidings, which much like hardy plank or cement-based siding products, no vinyl products or anything of that nature. So we have good quality product, and we're just trying to maintain a good, consistent character around the entire facility.
Thank you. I think I have quite a few comment cards, so I am going to move into letting people speak. I'd like to know if you received the letter from Meadowbrook Condominium Board of Director that shared some more concerns they had or requests.
Dated June 27th.
Okay, yep, I believe so.
Okay. After everyone speaks, I guess I could go into that list. I guess one of the simplest ones is a dumpster relocation.
Yes, that one. Really, we don't have much room on the property to put the dumpster, and with the front, let's go back to that. Let me just minimize everything I've got here. Oops, I don't have it anymore. Oh, I do. There it is. With that dumpster in the rear, it allows for the truck to be able to access it fairly easily, be able to pull in. Having to go and put that dumpster somewhere around, well, in the front would be the most convenient spot, but your ordinance probably doesn't allow a dumpster in the front yard, and that's
Correct.
not going to be optimum for us. But with the having the parking configuration that we have with the service drive running around the building, there really is, we could possibly shift that dumpster over to the other corner. But we have grade issues there where it's quite low and drops off. We have retaining walls that the neighbors have around the other side, which we're up above in grade and elevation, which makes that a convenient spot for that dumpster. But I'm really not sure where else we could put it.
Can you tell me about how many feet that would be from the neighboring condominiums where it's placed?
Sure. It's not quite 20 foot. The width of the drive that goes around the building is a 20-foot drive, and it looks to me as though it's probably closer to 15, 16 feet from the corner, this far corner of the concrete enclosure, straight down to that property line. There are existing trees that we intend to preserve around that area, as well as we'll landscape in addition. And it is a masonry enclosure that's proposed that would match the facade of the building.
Okay, and you're actually saying that there's basically not adequate room to place that in the corner of the parking lot, maybe?
It would be extremely difficult. We'd lose parking if we had the dumpster in the parking lot area, which we're kind of limited on the parking now. As well as most of our preserved trees are in that portion of the property. We're trying to preserve the trees in that area, and it would be difficult to preserve those trees and get the dumpster in there with the grade changes that are there.
Okay, the barrier concrete wall on the property line. They were requesting that you would also, obviously, if there was any construction damage, that you would agree to repair or sections, and that they'd like to know if you're agreeing to maintenance on that wall also once the facility is built.
That is their property. It's on their property. It's not on our property.
Okay.
Obviously, during construction, if there's any damage that's done, of course, we'd repair it. And what we propose to do is to have my engineering staff go out there, examine the wall there. I know there's some cracks and breaks in it already, so we would document the condition of the wall at this point in time, and then if there's something there, we can certainly, we'd repair what we'd break if it's something that we cause damage to. For the most part, with our construction, we've kept a buffer of natural vegetation around the perimeter, so we don't intend to disturb that area of land 6, 10, some places 15 feet from that property line. We want to stay as far away from that wall as we can with any work that we're doing as well.
Okay, thank you. That seems reasonable. There was a concern about LED lighting throughout the grounds. I think that's been furnished, and basically everything always is facing down. The photometrics aren't high. If you'd like to.
Elaborate on that? Certainly.
Yes, please.
Certainly. We've gone through the city's review with our photometrics and our site lighting. All of the site lights are LED. Energy codes kind of require that these days, and they would be downward shielded, of course, lights so that they're not directly shining onto the adjacent properties. Really, the majority of our lighting around the front in the parking lot area is where we really want our concentrated lighting. Around the perimeter. Generally, just wall packs would be what we would have in that area. We have, as part of our approved site plan, or recommended for approved site plan, provided a photometrics drawing showing that we meet the requirements. I'm not, do you have a half foot? What is the
Yeah,
requirement?
Madam Chair, if I could interject for a minute.
Yes,
It's
Mrs.
a
Kaplansky.
0.5-foot candle.
It is 0.5.
So they do meet the requirements for spillover, for manufacturer's details in terms of the style of the lighting. There are a little bit of work they had left to do on the photometric plan in terms of meeting our maximum foot candles. That's in the parking lot area. But that's something that we can confirm if the plan were approved, that they meet the maximum foot candles as well on the site.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bolden, there was also a question. Do you have a copy of the letter from Meadowbrook Condominiums Board of Directors?
Yes, I do.
Okay, could you address the service drive and the question and concern about the higher elevation and runoff?
Certain commissioners, the existing property is roughly 2.8 acres. Of that, naturally it drains about 2 acres to the south, west, and east. The remaining 0.8 acres drains towards Walton Boulevard. With this storm sewer design, the storm sewer system will capture roughly the 2.5 acres, leaving the buffer around the west, south, and east property lines to naturally drain. But the remainder would be collected, pre-treated, and detained prior to discharging to Walton Boulevard, which is owned and maintained by the Road Commission at roughly in the center of the property on Walton Boulevard. If there was an emergency situation to that storm sewer, the overflow is located at the northwest corner and would discharge towards Walton Boulevard as well, alleviating roughly 90% of what currently drains to the south will now be draining to the north and into a preferred storm sewer system instead.
Okay, thank you. I guess the only other concern I saw, which I wasn't, there was a request for fence installation, but it did look like there was plenty of landscaping by the walking trail. And where would you identify the benches on your plan that were mentioned?
We had a couple of locations. There's a little bump out right here, very close to where it would come. Actually, doesn't match the engineering plans. This one, I think the path comes out more to the west than where it is there, but the hydrant's moved that was there, so I guess we can put that back there now. But the one bench located in this side and over here on the other far corner would be another small little bump out with a bench for seating.
Okay. I don't know that it would be very likely that people would cross over from the trail into the condominiums. As you're aware, there was a request for installation of a 5'6" high fence and 133 feet in length. I guess we can, there's further discussion on that. I guess we can go into that. I guess in my opinion, I don't know with the landscaping and the setup, if I feel that's so necessary, but there might be other opinions on that. As far as the facade, I personally like the brick better. I like the submitted version better than what you're currently proposing with the hardy board. So my opinion on that. Also, we had one other email from Stephen Junquist, and he stated that his units back up against the west side of the property, and his concern basically was in preserving as much of the existing trees as possible all along the property lines. And he'd not like to look at a parking lot or have parking lot light shining into their windows. And with the trees being planted, is actually, will those parking lights be shielded from?
That property line is pretty thoroughly brushy and full of existing vegetation, and we intend to preserve as much as possible. With the landscaping plan that we presented here, it met the requirements of the city ordinance. We have met with the condominium association, or the developers have, and I believe they have agreed to, and I think it's on our landscaping plan, that we'll plant additional shrubs as necessary along that line to provide a buffer to prevent those headlights from being an issue, or from them having to see any vehicles that might be parked up there. Or
Okay, thank you. And so you have no problem with that being a condition?
No, that's no problem.
Okay. Because I would like to make sure that there's no parking light shining in people's windows. Okay, I am going to move on to speakers now. Just would like to remind everyone that everyone has a 3-minute window, and that all comments and questions will be answered together after everyone's had the opportunity to speak. So I will start by calling Pam Long.
Good evening. Is this on? Okay. I'm serving as chairperson of the Meadowbrook Outreach Committee relating to the Grace facility. Our board of directors met with Kristen Kampelansky and Jason Boughton of the city, and we met several times with JB and with David, who represent the project developers. On June 22nd, a list of our concerns was provided to the city to be passed on to the commission members in anticipation of tonight's meeting. I brought extra copies that, just in case you didn't get it. The developers also received the same list, and they responded to each of our concerns. Regarding the barrier concrete wall, and forgive me because a lot of this has already been touched on, but I just want this for the record. They're willing to agree that any and all construction damage will be repaired and/or replaced. We further requested that in the future we share the cost of maintaining the wall. After all, it supports the soil on their side of the parcel of land, which is 5.5 feet higher than the level on our side. The developer's response was no. The fence installation was requested, and I know that there was an opinion that it would be unlikely to have foot traffic through there. It would be unlikely now because it's like a forest in there. You don't even know where you're planting your feet and how far down the ground is. But we have had some foot traffic from Walton meandering in, and we'd like to make sure that that doesn't happen. That parking lot is going to clear off a lot, so it would be easier Not that we're expecting an invasion, but it just seems like something our community would appreciate. And we're not suggesting it be an opaque wall. We thought something with wrought iron or aluminum that resembles wrought iron, still airy, but would be a visual that that's where it ends. It doesn't continue on. And the developer's response was no. The relocation of the dumpster is very important. I think that it was suggested to be about 15 or 20 feet from our line. There's a home back there. There's a number of residences. I don't know if you've ever heard a dumpster being emptied. I happened to be at Kroger's one morning. Wasn't even thinking about it. It was 7 a.m. It's really loud. And then when you research dumpsters, you know that there's spillage, right? Which results in a little bit of rodent activity and a smell. That seems way too close to where people are living. And I think if you look at that drawing up there, some of the trees in the parking lot could be eliminated to create additional parking spaces, and the dumpster could be relocated there with the attractive enclosure that we saw when we visited their Lapeer facility.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, no.
That's 3
Oh, no.
minutes.
Okay. Can I just say one more thing?
I did go over a lot of your
You
issues
did,
already,
you did.
so.
We want, both gentlemen encouraged us several times to convey our support and satisfaction of the plans to the city, and we want to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Herschel Long.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present some of our concerns to the commission. One of them is for our security of our private property, and this relates to the 2 sections of wrought iron fence that Pam alluded to. About 5 foot high, one section running west to east at the dead end of Trailwood parallel to Walton Boulevard, and the other section running south to north separating Trailwood homes from the Grace property. These 2 sections of fencing would be our security and protect our property, our neighborhood, from foot traffic from Walton Boulevard and or the complex. Our current retaining wall, which is behind several homes on Trailwood Drive and Kirk's Court, separate our homes from the Grace building site. The grading of the land behind this wall is up against this concrete fence, which it's their land, it's their grading, so consequently it's pushing onto this wall, and that's what Pam was alluding to. It's inevitable that something's going to happen. There should not be a question as far as whose wall it is. The problem is being caused by the grading on the Grace property side. So there's no concern as far as who put up the wall, because that was not determined. I tried years ago to try to get, and there was no determination on that. They should be responsible for any costs or damage to the wall and any expenses or surveys on stress testing procedures that we might do on the wall. Our landscaping, our current is a lot of green space, as you can see, has numerous trees and bushes, which hide the sight and the sounds from both Walton and what might happen on the Walton side, on the Grace side. So we ask for many more trees and shrubs to be planted in the perimeter for the Grace site and for appearance and to serve as a sight and a sound barrier for our homes. Again, we want to thank the commission and members for hearing us, and we believe our ideas are reasonable requests from the residents of Rochester Hills, and we hope the commission will support us. Thank you.
Thank you. Dwayne Starzyk.
I'm one of the board members at Meadowbrook Hills. We are here because we are not happy with this development, and we are not on board. It would seem to me that the size of this property isn't nearly big enough to house this facility. Maybe you should try going to about 50 units, not 80s in the 80s. And you know, good neighbors make good neighborhoods. I don't see these developers as good neighbors.
Thank you. Richard Thomas.
Hi, I'm Richard Thomas, and I'm a board member at the condos, and I just want to echo what my colleagues have already said, and that is, fences make good neighbors. And I just don't see any reason not to put up fence that would prevent people from coming into our property. It's private property. It's not public property. And so, and with regard to the wall, Pam is right. That wall is there holding their earth from coming down into our condominiums. So I would hope that the developers would respect that wall and repair it if it's damaged, and they should share the costs of the wall if it does move after some time. Because there's no telling what kind of pressure is going to be put on that wall when you put a road up there that's 2.5 feet higher than the top of the wall. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Mike Ross?
I'll withdraw. If I was needed, that's why I signed up.
Okay, thank you. Karen Reynolds?
I am also on the board of the Condominium Association, and I really think that dumpster relocation has to be of definite concern because this is in somebody's backyard. That's not very fair, and I really would like to stress the fence installation. I think the fences are very necessary there. Thank you.
Thank you. Burke, I'm not sure if I'm reading this like Perney, or is it?
Burke Cuney, good evening. Madam Chairman, honored board, we respect and honor you because of your giving free time, volunteering, a tough job, and sometimes thankless. At this point regarding trees, my subject, your design you're looking at looks decent around the perimeter. Seems to me that the seniors themselves, maybe 82 of them or less, depending on what we see, 15% might be out walking in wheelchairs with canes. That's about 8 to 12 people a day, maybe 20, not every day. But bottom line is, we're looking at the tree area, and that walking path could be moved around the perimeter of the tree area, which is 1/3. The trees are 1/3 left. I understand 49 trees. That's a nice clump, and that's where wildlife could reside. We have at least 15 to 20 deer and about 4 fawns, and we think that would be a nice spot for them because they're being squashed already with the development. And so that would be a win-win situation for the developer because they could have their path to meet your ordinance to go around the perimeter of that wooded area. And the wooded area would be solid as compared to now. And lastly, the board with their ordinance would still have an area where people would walk around and meet the ordinance requirements. Therefore, my only saying is that old folks don't like bees, they don't like gnats, they don't like no-see-ums. They're not going to walk in those woods. So I think going around them with a path, if that's the ordinance demands, gotta love them.
Thank you. Nina Kosik?
I'm a resident on Meadowbrook Drive, and my biggest concern is the drainage issue. We spent a good substantial amount of money fixing a drainage issue. And we all know when you break ground, sometimes you don't know what you run into. And the way you're saying drainage, it's going to happen. may not happen there, because you don't know what you're going to run into when you break ground there. And we've had flooding in basements, and that's my biggest concern. We spent a lot of money to fix a drainage issue several years ago. And then also the fencing for the residents. The people walking through the complex, it's going to bring a lot more foot traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you answer a question for me? Were you saying that there's a current problem with drainage right now?
No, we fixed an issue about how many years ago?
Okay, so it was fixed several years ago.
Fixed
Okay.
several years ago. But when you break ground, you don't know, just like we had the road fixed a month ago. They ran into problems, it delayed them a month because they had to fix other issues. It may not work out the way they're saying.
Okay,
And
thank
my
you.
concern is my basement flooding, or
Okay.
others' basements flooding.
Okay, thank you. Jen McEntee? McIntyre? Yes.
Semi-illiterate.
Okay. Probably just
Hi.
don't read handwriting very well.
I'm Jeb McIntyre. I am now the tenant at 2791 Walton. I was the owner until these guys bought it from me. And there's some information that you may find useful. First, around the retaining wall. That retaining wall was put in, well, the history. My father bought that property in 1971. It was farmland. We were assured, and the zoning was such that we were assured that it would always be single-family around there. He moved his practice, his medical practice, from Birmingham, got a special use permit, and everything has been nice. The developers for the condominium were not supposed to be able to even develop a condominium association, but they did. And in their zeal to capture every bit of usable land as they could, they excavated and built that wall. When they did, it actually disrupted the tennis court that my parents had built for their exercise. It disrupted the backyard, so they ended up having to spend a bunch of money on berming and stuff like that. But that retaining wall is not holding dirt back from them, except because of their excavating the hill that was there before the retaining wall. That was the developer that did it in the first place, just in case that historical perspective is useful here. And finally, one small point. We have been dealing with trying to sell this property for now 4 years with many travails. J.B. Davies is a dear friend of mine. I've known him for 20 years now. We work together on a nonprofit organization. He's one of the finest men I know. He has impeccable integrity, and he's always been a man of his word for me. And in every dealing that I've seen, and he and I have been engaged in a lot of dealings, putting on shows for music. So you almost couldn't get a better neighbor than the guy that's behind this thing. So, and I'm available for any other questions you have about any of the history of the property. I was there. I actually I was the construction supervisor for all of the renovation of the building itself. I've lived there off and on for the last 50 years. We have lived there with our family for the last 30 years. So I know about everything there is to know about that piece of ground.
Thank you. Okay, that was the last speaker card that I had. Oh, yes. Do we actually, Ms. Gentry, do we have any email communications? Okay, it looks like no at this point. Ms. Roediger, do we have anyone's hand raised in Zoom?
No, we do have some attendees, but no one has raised their hand indicating they wish to speak.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kapelansky, with the concern with the dumpster and its location, if the dumpster was moved to the parking area, would the applicant be able to meet their parking requirements?
Yes. Right now, there are, I think, 2 spaces below the maximum requirement. So they do have, by ordinance standard, some spaces to lose.
Okay. I do think residents have a valid concern with the dumpster there with only 20 feet, not only with the noise, but, I mean, there could be some odors, et cetera. And being you could meet your parking requirements, it might be nice to move that dumpster. That's my opinion.
Can we respond? I'm sorry, would we be able to give you reasons why maybe?
Sure. Come on back up if you'd like to answer that.
So regarding the dumpster, it's going to be surrounded to begin with, so it's going to be aesthetically pleasing. We're going to put a skin on it that's going to complement what we're doing with the building, so it's not going to be ugly. It's going to be surrounded. The truth is, the trash is going to be emptied once a week to begin, twice a week when we get rolling. We are very happy to agree to only have it be emptied during business hours. And the sad truth of the matter is, the residents next door also have needs to have their garbage taken away. So they're going to hear garbage trucks out on the front side of their house. They do make noise. This is no different. We're the same as them. We both have the same need. It doesn't seem consistent to me that we're punished because they don't want to hear the truck when they are hearing the truck already on their own property. It just seems to be the same. We really need every parking stall we can get. When we have events for holidays and such, when the visitation is up higher, we need every space we can get. And so to lose a couple to this is frankly kind of a bigger deal than it may appear. Do you have anything to add, Scott?
Oh, one thing I'd like to mention, there is a possibility of, now that we don't have a fire hydrant, just past the entry, we have a little opening here where we had a water main and a fire hydrant, which is why we couldn't put it there before, but the fire department had us move our fire hydrant down. There is...
Point on that plan where it would be?
It'd be right over here.
Use your cursor. They can't see.
Yeah, I don't know if they can see, oh yeah, they can see my cursor up there. So right in this area is where we would propose to relocate that dumpster. It could be put there, I think.
So it's sideways, it's perpendicular to the drive. A garbage truck can get in there?
It'd have to be on an angle, yeah.
Okay. So you're conceding for us? That's a joke.
I'm not sure it's going to be farther from the property line and farther from their residences than what it is now, but,
How would that look aesthetically?
Yeah, it's on the front of your site.
it's in the front of the building and right close to the entrance, so it would have to be landscaped around and,
Okay, I see now, pulling that up, okay. Okay,
So would the garbage truck have to come through the portico to get it?
they're going to have to go through that to get out eventually anyhow. One way or another, they're going to go through there.
Can we slant it south so they can, well, I guess they can't because they'll have to come in.
They're going
Either way.
to come in and go around. They
Right.
probably come around this way and pull in that way, so you'd be shield the back of it,
Okay.
and then they can back up and pull out, so.
Well, then you wouldn't see it from Walton Boulevard, right?
You wouldn't see it from Walton Boulevard very well.
Is it possible we table that one and talk about fence and wall, if those are the only two open items?
oh, come back to it, you mean?
Yes,
Sure.
tonight.
Oh, yeah, definitely tonight.
But, okay.
Okay, so you wanted to talk about the fence and the wall again? Is that what you're?
We'd like a chance to respond to what we heard.
Absolutely.
Thank you. With regard to the fence, Scott, can you show us where on that plan the fence, the folks from Meadowbrook want the fence?
I believe it would be along this line right here
And going south?
and going
Turn left and
down
go
this
south.
line.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just on those two lines? Okay. So we didn't know that until we saw this memo that they wanted a fence. What we agreed to when we were out on the site was that we would put up tall bushes and make them dense to not prevent, but to discourage traffic. We were told that the traffic isn't coming through our property, it's coming through the church. So folks go through the church, cut across the very
Up here.
little end of our property, and then onto the Meadowbrook property. So even if we do the fence as suggested, it's not going to prevent people from going into the Meadowbrook property because they can still go to the right of the fence line, if you will, and squeeze in there. This was never meant to be a fence. We don't think the fence is aesthetically pleasing at all. We would be able to see it, our residents would be able to see it, which we think is a big negative. It's ugly. It's still going to, it's not going to prevent entirely. We think shrubs is a better solution. And in fact, shrubs is what we agreed to when we were out at the site with Jan and Pam and John Hart, pardon me. So we would like to agree to do what we said we'd do, which is just heavily and closely crop tall plants on the northern line, not the western line. That's our thought.
That's not on the plan, though, right?
Is it on the plan?
We added shrubs down in this area to cover.
But did we address that corner up there?
This corner up here?
Correct.
We've got the 3 pine trees that we planted there, but everything's natural in there. We weren't disturbing.
No, but we were suggesting, we talked to residents, we said we'd put in
planting
tall
some trees
bushes and
there.
tight.
I think that's on our landscaping plan that we
If it's not,
submitted.
we'll agree to it. We'll amend it.
No,
Okay,
it's only
so
on
that
that
would
west
be
line.
also a condition you're agreeing to?
Sure.
Okay, and what is the height of what you planned on planting and what species? I mean,
Gosh, I don't know. What do you think? I'm not educated in that matter.
Arborvitaes would be the practical thing to plant,
We can get them close
and they
enough.
grow quick, and they can thicken out. They make a good barrier, a hedge.
Okay.
I'm looking at, I don't see that they have, actually, was that maybe one of the invasive species? There was one of them that we plant, no, that was the Bradford pear is the one that's an invasive species they wanted taken off. I think we substituted that. So, yeah, we don't have any arborvitaes that are shown in our plant schedule now, but we can, certainly that would be an appropriate hedge to plant there, shrubs.
okay.
So that's what we'll offer.
Okay, and we will, I'm sure commissioners will work with these issues with you as we get going too. So the only other, okay, so you're obviously do not want to put the fencing in, and we have discussed at the beginning too, almost every issue that a resident did come up and speak about. And Mr. Bolton, did you have any further comment in regard to the drainage? I know someone mentioned they had drainage problems. They've been fixed. I'm assuming that the city's obviously reviewed this and doesn't have any concern.
Commissioners, no, with the design that's proposed, if anything, it should alleviate some of the stresses to the neighbors to the south with the detention of the 25-year storm event and then discharging to the north instead of the south.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Kalsunas.
Thank you, Chairperson Bernabik. I am familiar with Grace Properties because I used to have someone old engineering mentor at one of your facilities. So that's where some of my questions are. What type of residents are we looking at?
Yeah, our residents are people that need help with activities for daily living, bathing, medication management, getting dressed, using the bathroom, anything you can think of that is difficult as we age. And very few of our residents leave our community other than our courtyards. Mobility is a big issue and why people end up living with us. They just can't get around anymore. So there's not going to be people outside and doing laps and things around the community. Some people will be escorted out with family to go sit in the nice area there, so putting the dumpster there is going to impact that. I'm open to the dumpster change. I don't think it's great, but obviously we are good neighbors with everybody our other two communities are in. We have great relationships with them, and we want to have great relationships with them. So that seems like to be the big issue. There was only one area they were worried about coming through for foot traffic, and we said we'd put some nice big shrubs here to stop it coming from the church. So I think we can meet almost all their needs. If we have to adjust a few shrubs for headlights going into units, we can do that. Sorry, I kind of rambled, but it's just some thoughts I had.
That's fine. Let me, I guess, tell you about the situation, too. He suffered a severe injury, put him into a wheelchair, and that's when we put him into a Grace facility. There was several types of people. There were people that could drive, that flexibility of life outside of this. Is this, you expect that to be here?
We have no drivers. We had one, he was 98 years old. His van was on property, but he never drove it.
Okay. But you do plan on having some?
It's available. It's just not normal, because if people can still drive, they live an independent living, not assisted.
There was a comment about covered parking or Cartico or?
The portico.
Portico.
Just a drop-off area.
Can you show that?
So that's not covered parking at all?
It is not.
No.
Okay.
It's just a drop-off area.
That term is sort of new to me, so had to have that explained to me. But one of the biggest problems that I have in your facility right now, and that is when I brought him out of the hospital and put him into one of the Grace facilities, he tried his best to walk again. He would exercise, he would do bands, you name it, everything he could to walk again. One of the biggest things that helped him walk again at your facility was the sidewalk around the building, which you do not have. And to me, that is a showstopper. This is, hold on, let me finish.
Fine.
This is probably the first facility in, I'll say 17 years that has come, except maybe one had at one corner and they changed it, that have come in front of us without a sidewalk around it. I have a problem putting elderly people in the street. I'll tell you that right now. He used that sidewalk twice a day. And that sidewalk around your facility made him walk again. And I don't see that here, because that would be a benefit for someone in the future to use it also.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we're just putting residents in the drive, and the walking path that we have in the certain area, first of all, it's not on the plan, so it doesn't mean it has to happen. That needs to be on the plans. Whatever benches that we're talking about needs to be on the plans. But there is certain requirements that we have to do to help people cross the street. Red pass, markings, etc. I don't even have that on here. So I don't even meet my own, potentially, I don't meet ADA requirements for an elderly facility. That's another item that concerns me. There's a lot of, I think, loose ends that need to get tied up on this. The facade change, I'm not a fan of. The facade change, I'm not a fan of. I'd rather give you, I'd rather vote for moving the dumpster to the front and away from the residents. As Mr. Davies mentioned, we have a great screening around it. It should be sufficient for the neighbors. It should be sufficient for you. So that's fine. I don't know how you're going to get that into the Portico. It should be high enough to get a fire truck through.
Oh, yeah.
A ladder truck, you could get a garbage truck through it.
Yep.
Right? The fire.
There's a picture of that.
Yes. Show me what is the city required layout, and then what is your proposed? Because that went up too fast for me.
Yep. So this is what we have submitted with our site plan that meets the required facade elements for masonry on the facade of the building. So essentially, we've got brick on the upper level on either side of this little bump out that we have.
Okay, so that's your front facade on that side, and then I'm looking at your side, that's right, okay.
Yep. And so the other there shows the siding on that upper portion of the, just on those two sections right there is proposed to be siding instead of brick is what we're requesting.
Yeah, I'd like to see the brick layout as to what it is, because this is your other facility does have brick in the front. I think it all the way around almost. So it's nothing different, and it's a representation of yourself to your community. And I have a comment or a term that I use for years of siding monsters, and whether it's vinyl or hardy backer, it's still a siding monster. And it's cheaper. It's just it doesn't look good. And that's why we have those ordinances in regards to the bricks. We talked about the dumpster, the fence. The fence and the dividing area of 5 feet. I used to own a property that had the same issue with the 5 feet. And just because there's an example doesn't mean it's a good example, and it wasn't a good example to my neighbors behind me. There was a bank that was put in that we ended up taking over, and that fence was not one of the best things for the people behind them. I would rather see around your property a grass staff, and this is my idea, I like to hear what my colleagues say, a grass staff reinforced permeable surface that goes around the facility with a sidewalk to really give your residents somewhere to walk, as well as you don't have any cars going around the loop, as well as disturbing your neighbors. That's personally my thought on how all that should be answered. We talked about covered parking. We talked about the fire lane. Again, the fence. I know for the residents, it's a lot of the fences have to deal with your own property. And we always like our residents to be good our applicants to be good neighbors to the residents that are around. I don't think we've ever requested a wrought iron fence, ever, here as the board, or required it. But we have requested different type of screening. I would like, if we do a condition of screening, I'd like the height of it to start at about 6 feet, if that's okay? Of arborvitaes, or what are our options?
Arborvitaes would be the best planning there. 5 foot is typically, but 6 foot.
Okay, 5 foot.
5 to 6 foot would be.
What kind of spacings would we need to do properly shield it?
They grow in, and they thicken out pretty quickly. Typically, if you're doing a barrier type of obstruction type of wall with those types of shrubs, you might stagger them 5 foot apart.
Okay, so I know with my house, it took about 5-6 years for it to really grow out.
Yep.
So I'm looking towards you, our landscape expert, to answer that question as to height and correct spacing to make this a wall that's going to divert. Because I want people to look at it and say, oh, those are bushes. I don't want to go through them. And 6 feet apart, like I could see the houses. So, there would be a staggered and some different things as I think, a really good alternative to a wrought iron fence. And then the other thing I guess I would have loved to see on this plan, and I don't know if I didn't see it, are sight lines. What are our neighbors seeing? Were those in the plans, the sight lines? No? You guys don't have anything like that, and who's higher than the other? We usually do that for properties that are this close.
I guess I'm not sure what you're asking for with sight lines.
How high are you over your neighbors, if at all?
Our finished floor is maybe 8 feet to the bottom of the retaining wall around the property.
Okay.
I think that's about average. And that would be one of the problems with that. Around the perimeter is a steep slope. Right now, most of our water is shed from the site is running off and over the wall.
How could it go over the wall?
The ground above the wall is higher than the wall, so as it rolls across the ground, it goes in behind. It soaks in because it's mostly grass there, but with the parking lot and the way we have that laid out right now, I think we're typically about 8 feet above the grade around the back, which would be the backyards of the adjacent condos where that retaining wall is.
Okay. Thank you, Chairperson Brown-Abeck. That's what I have. Looking forward to everybody's thoughts.
Can I respond to a couple of the items?
Sure.
Yeah, we can definitely put the arborvitaes in a tight space, even especially if you have a landscaper guy that can recommend it. We have a guy who did a plan.
4 feet.
4 feet's fine.
5 foot high, 4 feet spacing staggered.
Let's do it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, got him.
And then I definitely understand your concern about walking in the parking lot. Our Oxford Orion community is built like this with no sidewalk around it. I'm there all the time. I walk residents around it. They have to be chauffeured. No one is allowed to be outside of our community without a family member or a staff member. And we go around it's a fire lane. It's not going to be used hardly ever. It's going to be for a delivery of food once a week and once or twice a week for a garbage truck. And then overflow parking. There's 6 spots for overflow parking, but everyone's going to park in the front. We want our staff members to park in the front at night so it looks like somebody's there. So it's not going to be like a lot of headlights. It's going to be rare when we have headlights, for one thing. And walking around that fire lane is not going to be much traffic. And it's actually a great walk because it's wide, it's smooth, so walkers can go over it instead of ka-chunk, ka-chunk. So just like bike riders enjoy to be on asphalt, I think your concern is valid for safety reasons, 100%. But our environment is, it might be 1 or 2 people a day. 2 is a lot.
Yeah, I disagree. The sidewalk is huge for me.
Okay.
It is absolutely huge. I am not going to put elderly people in the street.
If I could interject.
Come to the microphone, please. Got to hear you. Either go to the stand or stand works too.
So I think Dave's point, I'm the primary operator of the buildings. I'm a physical therapist. I work in the buildings with the residents. And I think the point that he's making is we agree 100% with your philosophy that the elderly people need the opportunity to walk. One of the reasons we build our buildings with the courtyards is it provides a loop inside the building during inclement weather, during rain. They can walk. Most of our residents can't make it around the inside loop once without assistance or without sitting back down into their wheelchair. To put a sidewalk on the outside of the building, it's double kill because they can walk inside the building and you might say, well, they want to be outside. That's the purpose of the courtyards, is they can be in the courtyards and be outside alone or with visual supervision, but they couldn't go outside and walk around the building without someone with them specifically walking them around the building. In that case, we would walk them, on the sidewalk or on the perimeter of the building, but that is extremely rare. We have probably at this point 150 residents between our 2 buildings, and I don't know who your resident was, but he would be one of maybe 5 that would utilize that sidewalk
And again, I never saw a person in the courtyard because he had a room up against the courtyard. I never saw a person in there ever. There was a nice little golf course thing, and there's really nothing to walk around.
They don't go out as much as you think. They love the courtyard rooms. It's a premium room, but they just like the view and
Sit on the porch.
But
sit
what,
on the porch.
again, what I saw a lot of people sitting on the porch, which I really don't see here.
We have a porch.
Our porches are actually located in the courtyard.
Every interior room.
And just to give you a little background too, my firm has designed over 130 of these facilities around the country. And what they're describing to you is pretty consistent with every single development company we work with. You'll notice the typical, I always call it the square donut plan, because the residents typically walk inside. There's just not as much activity as people would hope to think that mom or dad or grandpa or grandpa would do. You do have that rare case, and I will admit, you'll see it occasionally, but it's very rare.
I'm going to, again, I disagree, but I'm be interested to hear what my colleagues say, because I've seen what I've seen with my own eyes. So, thank you, Chairperson Bernard.
Thank you. Mr. Gaber.
Thank you. Turn that off. Okay, a few questions to follow up. I understand Nick's points about the sidewalk, but I was wondering, the drive itself, I mean, obviously that's a two-way drive, and that's a 20-foot width, right, Kristen? Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think that's correct.
Okay, is there any way possibly under our ordinance to make that drive one-way and reduce the width instead of having a two-way drive? Because you just said that this gets so little usage, very few times for loading, and maybe somebody goes around once in a while. So is that a possibility?
So that drive, the main purpose is that it is a fire lane. I would have to check with the fire department to determine what the minimum width is. I don't know that they would go less than 20.
Because I think we have some facilities, similar that do have, narrower, that it was done for that reason, to have a narrower drive and make it a one-way, and then you may not need that same width.
And for purposes, if this were just for automobiles, you're correct. That requires a narrower width if it's one way. But I think the fire department is the one that's dictating the width of the drive in this case. I can double check with them and see what their minimum width requirement would be.
Yeah, let's find that out, please, because if you could do that, I would assume you'd be amenable to that, given the amount of traffic, and then essentially you could narrow that. You could increase your landscape buffer size, against the neighbors, both on the I guess the west side, the south side, and then the east side, which I would think would be a benefit to everybody. So I'd like to see if we could do that, if that's a possibility. My other question is, how many people, what's the maximum capacity of the facility? I know we have 83 rooms, right? Or is it 83 beds?
It's actually 85, and it's 4 2-bedrooms, so 89.
Okay, that's it. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we covered that. In terms of tree removal and tree replacements, now, I couldn't find at my fingertips what the numbers were, because I know you're paying into the tree fund. There are a number of tree credits that you're not replanting on site. Is there, I looked at the landscape plan, and it just seems like there may be room for more trees. Now, I don't know what type of, utility interference there may be or something like that, but, along that west property line, maybe on the south side, some of the places where there are gaps, are there reasons why we can't replace trees on site for more screening?
No, and in fact, we maybe not replace trees, but that's where we intended to plant the shrubs that we agreed to with the adjacent properties. We could substitute trees in place of a few shrubs along there, if possible. Again, we're not wanting to disturb that land significantly, and by planting trees, we'd have to disturb it, so.
Right, but by disturbing it, I mean, it depends what's there. If there's a lot of underbrush that's very low quality that people really don't care about, it may be somewhat opaque at screening, but that doesn't mean it's attractive. It doesn't mean it should be retained.
When we walked the property a couple of times with 3 or 4 board members, they wanted us to leave as much growth as possible and as thick as possible, and we are going to absolutely do it. Our contractor is here tonight, and he said he's going to take away as little as possible, and then if we have to take more, we will later. But we're going to try to leave a big buffer so they don't hardly see us and know we're there.
Okay. Well, I think that's obviously the intent, because you don't have large buffer widths, between the drive and the property lines. So, I'd like to see that re-examined, see if there's any way we can, preserve more trees on site and work with that, because we do want a thick buffer. We do want to, I think all the neighbors would agree, they want to, maximize the screening that they have, so they're not looking at a long two-story wall that, the neighbor south of you, that's basically, the peak of that is 3 stories above their ground level. When you take into account the 8 foot to get to your finished floor level, and then 2 stories on top of that. So that's a concern. I'd like to look at that if we could. Let's see. Do you think your parking is sufficient for your needs based on, your other facilities and other operations? Because it seemed, I read in your impact statement, sometimes you could have 20 employees there at a time. So that takes up 20 spaces, and that gives you, what do we have, 42 or 52? I can't remember the number. With visitors and such on the weekends, are you going to have ample parking, would be my question.
We don't want to lose any parking. But yes, we're fine.
So yes, you do feel confident that there won't be overflow parking, that you can accommodate the parking that you're going to have needs for?
We haven't had that situation in the other 2 communities.
Okay.
In our other 2 communities combined, we've had 1 resident driver. So we've had 1 car from our residents parked in 2 parking lots. So the only spaces that are used are the employees and the visitors.
And visitors, but visitors can be a large number.
We never have 20 visitors in the building at the same time unless we're throwing a special event, a Christmas party. We would have.
So, right, that's what I was going to ask. In those types of occasions, what do you do? Would you work like with the church next door to provide for overflow parking for special events? Okay. Holidays? That's okay. That's right. My thought in terms of the materials and the facades, I'm open to what you're suggesting, but I'd really like to see a rendering of the entire facade, on the front side where where the issue is, see it with the hardy plank, and then see another rendering with the brick, because just looking at the corners doesn't help me to really gain the perspective I need. Because these are long, these are long expanses, so I'd really like to see what that looks like, more straight on if we could.
We've got 3 sides in the renderings. Only one is not the back side. Our Lake Orion community just won Best Curb Appeal for best looking business in Lake Orion. So that the residents voted that. So this is going to be beautiful. This is going to be nicer than that. And we just feel like the way we've designed it and the design elements, the hardy board looks better than all brick, and then hardy board on the other 3 sides. And we just hope you would agree with us. Can you blow that up a little more, Scott? There you go. That's going to be helpful. So if you go over to the front, it's got brick up top, and it's just too much brick. And then if you show them the other one, Scott, and blow that up, please.
Certainly.
And it's the texture changes and the color changes that make it look more like a home. Isn't it beautiful? I mean, this is going to make you proud. This is going to add to the community. We're not going to take away from the community.
Well, actually, I tend to agree with you because I think the contrast looks better. On some of your facades, though, I think you may still have the ability to dress them up a little bit more. Like those upper windows look incredibly plain all the way on that front expanse. I don't know if you can put any type of awnings over those or do something to dress that up. On your west elevation, that was incredibly plain, and that's a very long expanse. I know you had a couple of the architectural elements, the vertical elements, but you still have like those windows on the first level and such that really look nondescript, as opposed to the east side where you have awnings over them and they jut out a little bit, and there's much more architectural definition. So I'd like to see if we could take a look at that, please, and see what we can do. Along those lines, I wanted to ask Kristen, there is a note on page 2 of your staff report that says no single structure face can exceed 180 feet, and there's a blank under the proposed and a blank under staff comments. So what is the, I guess, what's the ordinance issue with
that's correct. So they have a vestibule right now that is a more significant bump out in the center there, and they have the 2 smaller architectural features. Staff's opinion was it met the minimum requirement. We did encourage them to do a little bit more to break that up, but they did want to come to the Planning Commission and see if you agreed that they met the minimum requirement.
So what you're saying is, I mean, let me ask you this, how long is that, is the building from front to back?
I don't know either.
I'm not sure.
I didn't see that.
Not quite sure.
Well,
No, I didn't have the
it's
floor plan.
substantially more than 180 feet, right?
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so what you're saying then, Kristen, is that because they have those bump outs, those vertical features, that's enough to essentially ensure that, that it's not a single face that exceeds the 180? That
Right.
They're smaller segments?
Right, so the
if you will?
intent of that provision in the ordinance is to make sure that we're not all staring at one giant big blank brick wall. So they did add some features. Some of their original proposals didn't include that.
I see. Okay.
It's a matter of opinion whether you think that breaks it up enough.
Okay. Answers that. Architectural design, let's see. So I think that takes care of my concerns at the moment, but I do agree, in terms of whatever we can do to enhance the buffering and, replace trees and make the screening, more attractive and more opaque would be the way to go.
I know we kept all the trees we possibly could. And anything with the additional buffering, we are going to leave it. So we will do all we can to meet that. That's all I mean.
And let me ask one other question. Your Lake Orion facility, how large is that facility?
That is 54,000 square feet on 1 story. This one is 67,000 square feet on 2 stories.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Just would like to mention, too, since we were into the renderings, that it is a requirement that we have a color rendering from every elevation. So I did see that you submitted the front and the rear elevations in color, but we didn't have the option to review the other sides. That is a requirement, just so you know.
Yes, our original submittal included the colored renderings, and then we made the modifications or the colored elevations, excuse me, but the most recent elevations that went in didn't get colored before being sent in.
Okay.
So I can show the original elevations, but they look fairly plain because they don't have these elements that we're looking at in this rendering here, so.
Right. Well, that's where some question marks come in. And actually, as far as amenities, those weren't clear on your plan either. When Mr. Kalsunis brought up the benches, I mean, I asked where the benches were too. Generally, when we have plans submitted, it's pretty clear where we might find certain things on the plan so that we are clear with what we're looking at, where something's located. And if it works all the way around, you know what I mean? When you have things missing and you're saying, well, it'll probably be around there, basically we like to have everything identified and clear on the plans before we approve something. So just so you know. Ms. Neubauer.
Thank you, Chairperson Bernabek. I have just a few questions about the facility itself before I get into the things that were previously addressed. According to your plan, you have a memory care section, is that correct? Is that a lockdown section? How many rooms do you have that are locked down?
20.
Okay, and is that isolated on the second floor, or is that mixed?
Mixed.
Okay, how are you going to control the lockdown? Is it with an alarm or with doors that just lock on their own?
Keypad doors.
Okay, so no alarms. Okay, very good.
Well, yeah. Well, our other communities, we keep them locked down continuously. So
If they're
there's no-
mixed, I
no
guess I'm a
alarms.
little confused on how that would be accomplished.
You mean mixed by there's assisted living and memory care on the same floor?
I'm talking about the lockdown dementia floor. Is that mixed with any residents that will not not have the lockdown requirement, the wandering?
It's not a
issue?
floor. It's one corner of the upper level has a specially dedicated wing to memory care.
Okay,
So that, in that particular instance, the doors leading into that quadrant of the building
okay.
do have a delayed egress alarm system that goes off, and that's something that we do through licensing through the state of Michigan.
Okay, so that's just that's 20 rooms only?
Just 20.
Okay.
Correct.
Are you going to have your own on-site medical?
How do you handle medical?
We're going to have a nurse on staff.
So that's just for medication management, or is there going to be PT? Like, what is your nursing and medical going to be doing for the residents there?
So we monitor health and report to doctors. We do not diagnose. We follow doctor's orders.
So do you do medication management?
We do.
Okay.
And physical therapy.
You wanted to say something, sir?
I'm probably better. So we're a licensed home for the aged, and as a licensed home for the aged, we have a full-time registered nurse or licensed practitioner nurse, LPN, in the building. That's the only medical person that we will have on site that is an employee of Grace Senior Living. But we work very closely with ancillary services, so Medicare certified home health agencies will come into our building. In both of our facilities that we currently have, we have an outside company. I don't know if you're familiar with Health Quest Physical Therapy. I'm not sure if they're in Rochester, but Health Quest Physical Therapy sets up an outpatient clinic inside our building, but they do not work for Grace Senior Living. They're an independent entity that's on site that can provide PT, OT, and speech.
Which is private pay, correct?
Which is, no, that's Health Quest's on-site clinic is covered through insurances, but that's totally with them. We have nothing to do with it other than to recommend, hey, you might benefit from this service, and to the powers of attorney, and if they choose to use that service, they choose to use it. If they don't, they don't. Our job as a home for the aged is simply oversight. We're there as a kind of an oversight for medication management, so we pass all the resident meds every day, and our nurse is there to kind of oversee. If she sees an issue, we don't address that issue like they would in a nursing home. If she sees an issue, she contacts the physician and the POA. They work together to set up a plan, and it's an outside plan. We don't really provide health care in a home for the aged.
So out of your 80-plus residents, how many of them are under guardianship or have a POA?
80%, 90%, a very large number.
Okay. What's the size of your rooms in the range of the room size for the residents?
I think the studios are 360 square feet, and the one bedrooms are in the 450 to 500 square feet, and the two bedrooms are around 650.
Okay. With respect to the fencing or the trees, I think that it's good that there's been resolution to that, or appears to be resolution that you're willing to do that. I think the residents appreciate that. I think we appreciate that as well. I think it's necessary. So I think it's good that you're willing to compromise on that, and also to relocate the dumpster. My concern is an issue with the possibility of construction damage to that wall. I understand that the wall belongs to the condominium, and that you said that, of course, if there's any construction damage, that we'll pay for it. I would urge you to work with the association in order to do a primary assessment on the wall together so that there's not a dispute later. Because if we want to be neighborly, it's important that we be proactive in avoiding disputes. So it doesn't make any sense to say that I'm going to send my engineer to go check the wall to make sure the condition now, so that when there's an issue, the residents end up saying, well, that wasn't there before, and you say there was. So I think a partnership in even the preliminary evaluation of the wall would be important, just so that we can avoid any possible dispute, since there's already a little bit of an issue with that now. Let me quickly make sure. With respect to the brick and the facade, I do think it looks beautiful the way that you proposed it. I understand that we have the brick requirement. Another way that could be, and I'm not an architect, we were just talking about it, if there was a way to take maybe that cultured stone up to break up that full brick facade, or change the color of the brick so that it still does look very homey. I think that would satisfy the commissioners, the requirement, and also do what you're talking about so that it doesn't look like a completely brick facade. I work with the elderly a lot. I'm a probate attorney, so I'm very familiar with these kind of facilities, and I don't think a fence would be nice. I don't want the elderly to feel like they're in, it's difficult when you get moved from your own home into a facility, right? So you don't want them to feel like they're in a prison. And anything you can do to make it look homey. I know that the culture stone is a little more expensive, but it's worth it, because when you are in that industry, because of what you said about your family experience, why I'm in this industry, you care for the indigent and the people who are vulnerable. So maybe the added expense to make it look more beautiful, taking the cultured stone up, would be a good expense.
Up that middle section, you're saying?
Yeah, instead of having, so you could still have the brick, it would satisfy the requirement, take the cultured stone back up, maybe even change the color of the brick to make it to match what you have on the siding now. I'm sorry?
Well, I am the architect, so I do know the square footage requirements, and
Okay.
to be honest with you, to do something like just in the middle where the cursor's pointing at now does not meet the requirements. What we had shown, if you switch back to the brick motif, that percentage is what you need to actually make the requirements, is all of that amount for the street side.
So since you're the architect, maybe you can take my suggestion and figure out a way to make it happen so that you still meet the brick requirement, but still keep it as happy.
We just asked to look at it. If you basically tell us that we must meet the brick requirement, we will follow that.
Or even change, like I said, you can change the color of the brick, whatever you feel is satisfactory. But again, with respect to the fencing and the trees, I think coverage, screenage for the residents is appropriate in the condominiums, but I think a fence would make it look too much like we're taking you from a home and putting you in especially since there is going to be a lockdown section that's going to be difficult for the people who are moved there and for the other residents who experience. That's why I asked you about the alarm system. And you're going to be reporting to POAs and guardianship, people under guardianship, to the court. So hopefully you do a good job. I'm sure you're aware of everything that's been happening in the nursing homes. And, we want good in Rochester. Sure. Okay? All right. That's all I have. Thank you. Rochester Hills, Rochester Hills, Rochester Hills. The great city of Rochester Hills. Thank you. I apologize. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Neubauer, I agree. We were kind of talking about that over here, too, as far as the siding goes. I actually don't have an issue with the hardy board look either, but I do agree that it could help both in this rendering, all those architectural features if they were made brick or cultured stone or something, even on the backside, that might help kind of break up that long expanse, and I think it would provide a real nice look as well. A couple other things to touch on before I forget here. Walking has been a concern, and you're saying that the courtyards will be used for that, but we don't see how they would be used. There's no courtyard, or there's no walkway around the courtyard, so it would help if that was just shown on the plans as well, because it was alluded to earlier that if it's not shown, there's no guarantee that it'll happen. So it would help if that was shown on there.
Mr. Weaver, could you move your mic a little bit closer so?
Sorry,
Okay,
is
thank
that
you.
better?
Yes.
Okay. Couple other things. Where do I have it here? Oh, another mention about maximizing the amount of trees that we're showing on here. It might help if on the landscape plan, if some of the existing trees were shown more to their true size than the little dots that are on there. I know I've had to do that in the past, and it does greatly help because it will help show us what space is actually available. Because just looking at this, we can fit 40 more trees on here, but if the trees are have 30 to 40 foot canopies, it would help to show that on here. A couple other things with the landscape plan. I'm a little concerned, you're showing boxwoods running along Walton Boulevard, and I know that's pretty heavily salted in the winter, and boxwoods can be a little tender. So I would recommend swapping those out with something that's a little more salt hardy. Similarly, the hydrangea, they tend to struggle with salt, and I know arborvitae can as well, so we need to be careful where those are placed. Foundation plantings around the building. I don't see any on the landscape plan, but your renderings look immaculate. So I would like to see more of a harmony between what's shown there and what's on here, so that if you're showing us this rendering and we all buy into it, it looks fantastic, but when we get out there and it's built, there's not just dirt or grass running up to the building. From your other buildings, we're kind of looking at them here, it doesn't look like that would be the case, but again, if it's not on the plan, there's no guarantee that it'll happen. So if we can have the landscape plan more closely mimic what's shown there, it would be greatly appreciated. You have some ginkgos in the parking lot, and it looks like they're very close to the underground detention. I would advise maybe swapping that half section of underground detention, maybe shifting it north so that the root systems for that those ginkgos don't start infiltrating and causing issues there. The property line on the east, looks like some crab apples crammed in with some arborvitaes. I would recommend maybe eliminating all of those and just running a row of evergreen trees to provide better screening. Personally, I think I would like to see that. It would do better for the neighbors, and I think you'll have more success because the arborvitaes would be heavily shaded by those, by the crab apples, and arborvitaes do much better in sun. Similarly, the screening along that we talked about along where we were talking about putting the fence in, I think if those were planted with maybe some evergreen trees rather than arborvitaes, you get a little bit more impact over time. And I think they could be shaded a little bit too much for the arborvitaes to really go for. I think that's all I had. But no, I do appreciate the information you guys have been able to share pretty quickly. That's very appreciative. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Detloff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think overall this is a good project, so thank you for bringing that to Rochester Hills. A couple questions that I had. First of all, I do agree with Ms. Neubauer on the in that one area. If that could be a contrasting brick on that, I think that would really kind of dress that up in a nice way. Is your medical is that going to be 24/7?
The medical, I could probably talk loud enough to not do this, but the medical, as a home for the aged, we're required to have an on-site nurse full-time, not 24/7.
Okay.
We do have, each shift has a med tech, a trained med tech. It's usually a CNA,
Okay.
certified nursing assistant, who is the med tech for that shift and also supervisor.
Okay.
But we're not really we're not a medical facility, we're not a nursing home. We are really, what we are is we are an apartment for the elderly that provides some assistance, helps them with things that they struggle with on a daily basis. If they need 24-hour medical care, we're not allowed to admit them into our building.
Okay.
They would be required to go to a long-term care facility.
Okay. And in your environmental impact statement, you indicated the, demand for senior housing and that. So how do you, that information, are you constantly, you have your thumb on the pulse here with the market studies and everything like that? How do you determine and then address what those needs are?
Yeah, we do feasibility studies in communities before we open. Our first community filled up in 9 months. Our second community opened up during the pandemic, which made it difficult, and Lapeer Road was under construction for 3 months, but we're filling actually at a faster rate now than we did there. Part of it is our reputation, the way we do our buildings. They're homey, they're beautiful, and we give the best part of Grace you can't see, and that's the care that we give.
Yeah, and I have not had direct personal experience, but I have had friends who have with Grace, and always great remarks regarding that. So thank you for that, and I really thank you for the effort that you've done to date in meeting with the residents and surrounding neighbors and that. It seems like your willingness to do that, obviously, to show that you do want to be a good neighbor to that. So we thank you for that. And then the rent structure, again, is $350 for a studio, $450 for a one-bed, and $650 for a two-bedroom?
That was square footage.
Oh, size. I'm sorry. Square footage. Yes. 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 Sign me up. I'll be okay. Yes. I'm sorry. That's right. Yeah. I saw what the rates were, but yeah. So $350 for the studio, $450 for the one bedroom, and $650 for the two bedroom. Okay. Very good. All right. And thank you again for bringing us to Rochester Hills, and wish you a lot of good luck with this project. So,
Thank you. Mr. Struzek.
First, I wanted to say that having this type of housing is very important for Rochester Hills. I recently, my elderly grandfather, who passed away a few years ago, but he had to transition from an independent living to having a living where he was assisted by folks, and having him in that facility gave a lot of peace of mind to my family, and being able to have a facility close to us so that we could visit him more often was also very important. So, if my parents ever needed this type of facility, I would hope to have one that was nearby so that I would be able to be as involved as possible and wouldn't have to pick between moving or having long trips to visit my parents. Had a few questions. One was about how the development will change the flow of stormwater. This is something that's near and dear to me over the past few years as I've studied stormwater, and especially since last Friday when my neighborhood was under 3 feet of water from the storms that we had. Do we know if, I know that you stated that during a 25-year event that this would be better. What about just during normal rain events compared to what it is now unimproved compared to what is proposed with the storm sewers? Is this going to divert more rainwater away from the neighboring properties?
Thank you for the question, Scott. With regards to lower rain events, it captures everything up to a 25-year storm event before it reaches the overflow wall and spills over unrestricted downstream towards Walton Boulevard. The way the storm standards are written for the city of Rochester Hills, there's a variable restrictor system. So there's a smaller restrictor at the we'll say at the bottom of the detention pond, letting those low storm events discharge at a slower rate. As the system fills, there's a 2/3 restrictor to let more water out. And then lastly, there's a overflow spill well at the 25-year elevation if we have a storm event that reaches that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And do we know if the surrounding residential properties, do they have a dumpster or do they just have trash bins that they place out? Trash bins? Okay, so, yeah, and that's a big difference because I've got near my home a property that it's a commercial property that has a dumpster, and every once in a while, like they wait right until 6:59 turns to 7 a.m. and I live maybe a few hundred feet away from it, but everyone's waking up when that happens. Where with the trash bins, it's annoying and it's longer, but it doesn't come out of nowhere. You know it's coming. You hear it coming down the street. So I'm definitely in favor of moving that dumpster. I think that's a major concern, and if I lived just a few tens of feet away from it, that would be a rather shock twice a week. And then we spoke about business hours with regard to the dumpster. What are the business hours?
For the building?
You said that the dumpster would only be emptied during business hours. I want to know, what are business hours?
Good question.
Is it 7 a.m. or is it 9 a.m.?
I think that was an offer to allow you to make a restriction as to when that dumpster could be dumped. So if you wanted it to be 9 to 5, that would be, I believe that was what the intent was, is that arrangements can be made with the garbage company, the collection company to come at a given window of time rather than be parked out front at 6:45 waiting for 7 a.m.
Yes.
So they could bang the lids on the dumpster and wake you up. So.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'd prefer that to be 9 a.m.
Yeah.
Whenever I have a day off, it's a bummer to have that dumpster go, and it looks like this community has a mixture of people who both work and have days off, and then people who maybe have retired and don't have to work anymore, and I don't want them to be waking up at 7:01. The rest I had were comments. I prefer more trees, but not at the expense of what the neighbors want. So if the neighbors wanted some of that existing brush preserved, and that would have to be the sacrifice for more trees, I'd rather have what the neighbors want. And with regard to screening and fences, I definitely prefer green barriers as opposed to fences. I think that's the kind of community that I would prefer to be in. And I also would like to see on the site plans all the details for the courtyards, benches, landscapes. I'd like to see that all on paper. Thank you, Chairperson Brnovic.
Thank you. Mr. Hooper.
Thank you, Chairperson Brnovic. Just a few things. So what I'm gathering then is you're not independent living and you're not
Nursing home.
Yeah, what are it called? Medicaid?
Skilled nursing.
Skilled nursing, right? So you're the tweener in between. So people that graduate from independent living go here to your facility because they're paying for independent living, pay for here. So you do not accept Medicaid then, right? This is a private pay only.
Correct.
Okay. So for the architectural, I agree with Ms. Neubauer. I think as a compromise, and it's kind of been echoed here, is on the bump out relief elements, I would make them all cultured stone around the building as a compromise. To submit the ordinance requires more brick than what you guys would really rather do. I think it's a compromise. I think that's provides a breakup of the facade.
Okay.
And, that would work, I think, for what both the ordinance and your desires are. So for the fire lane, drawing 10, sheet 10 on site plan addendum pretty much addresses that, has the fire lane schematic draw out of fire truck to traverse the building, and based on this, I don't think you're going to get anything less than 20 foot. They're not going to accept anything less than that in order for the truck to get around. So I think we're pretty much cooked with that.
It was very tight to get it to fit.
Yeah, so I think with that, we're pretty much there. So as far as the sidewalk goes, I guess I support the operator of your facility where 80% of the people are on POAs, restricted walking abilities, and when they do want to exercise, I think the indoor walking is going to be primary. And I kind of go with the person that operates the facility versus us up here as far as that. So I think the indoor walking around the courtyard would be great. It'd be great to be shown how that's going to actually happen versus the courtyard just a blank piece of paper. It doesn't show anything. And then people that do want to go outside, I support what you're saying. I just don't see it. I don't see any reason why they can't walk on. They're going to be assisted and walk on the outside asphalt surface. I just don't. I don't think there's a conflict there to do that.
If I could just interject for a second,
Sure.
too. When we talk about walking in the building, we don't really refer to walking into the courtyards. It's a gathering place that they typically go. The walking typically takes place in the loop, in the hallways around the building.
Oh, you're just walking around the hallways. All right.
Yeah, they walk the hallways.
I misunderstood. I thought you said
No,
walk the
no,
courtyard.
it's the courtyards are just there for nice gathering spaces. There's covered areas outside. It's their outdoor entertainment space.
Okay. All right, so that's more of a landscape feature.
It really is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, obviously, before, I mean, we need what that consists of, what it looks like. I support all the discussion tonight about the landscaping, that the plan's approved. We need to add all this landscaping that's discussed, you know, the showing it around the building, showing it in the courtyard, showing the added screening, showing correct sizes. I agree with Mr. Weaver on that. It's always, perception is wrong if you don't show the correct sizes out there. And then you've already agreed to the relocation of the dumpster. I think that's a fine compromise there, to where it's away from the residents and not obtrusive to be seen from Walton Boulevard. And the garbage operator is going to have to go through your portraiture anyhow, right? I mean, so I don't see a way around that. And as far as the final statement would be, these type facilities, we have several of them that we've approved recently in the last, dozen years. You couldn't ask for a quieter neighbor. You could not ask for a quiet, I'm serious. Every single one of these, you hardly even know they're even there. As compared to having single-family homes that could be built on the property that would generate significantly more noise and backyards and whatnot up to the facility. So just the facts, honestly. Just seen, but I've been on this commission 22 years. I mean, it's just seen it over the years of how they operate. So with that, that was all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairperson Bernabic, if I could jump in.
Oh, sure, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Go ahead.
Just very quickly, so Commissioner Gabriel, we were able to find the answer to your question about the width of the driveway. So the fire lane does have to be 20 feet minimum and go up to 26 feet in the location of fire hydrants.
Thank you. And I'm sure we've had much discussion with requests, changes, revisions. I'm sure you have good notes because it's become pretty obvious that this is going to have to be postponed, and we'll see it again so that you have time to make all of those changes correctly to the plans and then, come back, whether it's landscaping, the building facade, et cetera, the dumpster, accessories. And Mr. Kalsunis, I am assuming you were going to move toward a motion for that.
Thank you, Chairperson Bernabic. And yes, I agree 100%. I ran out of paper for changes, And usually when that happens, it's time for just a sort of refresh of the prints and come back in front of us in the future. I'm still, again, with myself, I definitely plan on making a motion for postponing, but I still like to see the sidewalk. We're looking at your other facilities, they all have sidewalks. And to me, that's a big deciding factor for that. It's going to feel bad on me if somebody, or myself, if somebody gets injured walking in the street because of a truck or a driver that didn't see him. The parking lights shining on a neighborhood was one of the items that we had. A question to staff, our requirements for parking lights is everything should be shining down and the bulbs cannot be seen by any of the neighbors. So that's technically already addressed, correct?
Correct. That's been addressed.
Okay.
But they do need to work on adjusting the wattage of some of those lights to meet our foot candle requirements for maximum foot candles.
Okay, so that is another thing for the minutes to update. I have the natural barrier of 5 feet high, 4 feet spacing needing to be added to those two property lines. Submit the amenity and pathway plan of the facility. Revise relocating the dumpster to the parking lot area. That's for the notes. It's not a motion today, so these are just my notes.
What was the one before that?
Amenity and pathway plan for the facility, including the courtyards, please. Oh, you said that, sorry. Right now, the benches weren't shown, the path wasn't shown. Again, it's the open space, because I think staff is going to have to look at it, because technically you're not supposed to disrupt anything under trees, so there may have to be something that gets looked at in regards to what you're doing, et cetera, and so that it gets approved. The brick, I do agree with my fellow colleagues. I think I will be happy with giving sort of that a change of plans of by putting brick in the bump outs myself, and I think a lot of commissioners say that having the brick in the middle of the bump outs, then we could talk about not meeting, or stone, thank you, stone, in the bump outs, then we could talk about not meeting the requirements for the brick, because that's going to make it look, that's going to be a nice touch. And I'm sure, again, I've been in your facilities. I like your facilities. The only reason why he's not there anymore is because of the government restrictions. Put a big toll on him with a lot of the people there. But that was none of your doing. That was what you had to do. So your facilities are top notch, and I think that's going to make it look like it's like that instead of siding. So the bump outs, we talked about the culture stone there. Landscape plan, remove box wells, salt type plants, replace it with salt hardy plants, and then there was many items in the minutes by my colleague that mentioned water, et cetera, high water areas, watch out for that. And then we'd also like to see the landscape plan revised to show whatever shrubs you plan on having around the building and in the courtyard too. Because right now this does look pretty, but it's not on paper. And we like it on paper. So with that, Chairperson Bernabic, I would like to make a motion to postpone to a later date, agreed to by as when the applicant is ready to bring this item to the Planning Commission again.
Do I have a second? Okay. A motion by Mr., and the applicant, I'm assuming, is agreeing to this. Just like to verify. I'm assuming you wouldn't want us to take a vote on this tonight, so, but I just would like that verification. Okay.
Can we come back in 2 weeks then?
Will it, if they're ready, will that work?
The next planning commission meeting is July 20th?
20th, correct.
Oh, July 20th.
So the 20th is the next meeting?
Yes.
We have to get stuff back into by what date?
Tomorrow, no. Well, Kristen will talk to you.
Well, we can coordinate with you. So the 20th, sorry, give me a second here. Packets go out the 14th right now. So I would say by the end of this week. By the end of this week, we would not do a full, staff review again in terms of sending it around to all the departments, because a lot of the items are items for me to double check. So we would need, that would give us only about 5 or 6 days to look at the plans, because we have to get our packets out for everyone.
Yeah, I don't know that you want to rush it. You want to have everything. I'm assuming you want to come back and move through with approval instead of us having to request another postponement.
Our tricky part is we got to get started and we got to get so much done before winter, and if we
Right.
delay much, we're not going to make it. So we kind of got to be ready for the 20th.
Well, if you feel that you can meet that deadline, in the time.
Pretty much, Scott.
Yeah. Chairperson Brnovic, if I may add, a lot of times when we postpone developments, the developer comes back with items sort of in line with what we're talking about, and they've also talked with the residents. And they talk to the residents to the point that there really isn't a resident here because they're happy. Try to do that too. Talk with your neighbors and get them on the same page. There's a lot of things that were discussed today. I think it will satisfy a lot of the issues, but talk to your neighbors too. And hopefully at the next meeting, we get a lot of happy people or nobody. And then we'll have to do the work, confirm, and have discussions then, but talk with your neighbors. Thank you.
Okay, now you had talked to your neighbors. So were these items that came up after the fact or items that weren't resolved when you met with your neighbors?
A little of both. Like the fence came up June 22nd. We had met a couple of times on site and agreed to the shrubbery changes and things like that. The dumpster, the fire hydrant got changed at the last minute, so we didn't have that option to move the dumpster. Now we do. So it's just a kind of a mixed bag. We've tried to meet everything we can. We want to be great neighbors. We're going to be neighbors, so we might as well get along, and we will.
Okay, that's great. And I also think it's a very good idea, Ms. Neubauer's suggestion about meeting with the head of the association, yourself, in regard to that wall, so that there is a review, so everyone's on the same page with, there was a crack here, previously, this happened, you know what I mean.
The good news is our contractor thinks when all this water, which is now 90% of the property goes to the wall, when it rains like it is now, that wall is under maximum stress from all that weight.
Mm-hmm.
When we capture that water, we're going to extend the life of that wall. There's no question about it.
Okay. Did you have any further questions in regard to anything tonight? I mean, that you would like any clarity on before you come back?
There will be minutes that we can get a copy of so that we can make sure we didn't miss anything.
Minutes? Mo, will those minutes be ready? Yeah?
Yes, I can, yeah.
Okay. Yes.
I'm sorry, when would they be ready?
I mean, there were a lot of landscaping comments in different areas too, including buffering from the parking area with headlights and other areas, putting in evergreens instead of arborvitae. I'm sure you all have notes on it. I just want to know if it, like I said, my question was, is there any other question you have? Yes.
I have one more question. If this is a tall order, frankly, to get all this done.
Okay.
Get to you by Friday.
Would you like to come up to the mic so we can all hear you?
Thank you. It's a tall order to get all this done. It's Tuesday night. We're going to caucus when we leave here, but we really have 2 business days now to get all this stuff packaged and back to you, really. So it's going to be pretty tough. If we are not able to do that, is there a special date that we could get, like tonight, that would be not that far after 7:20?
Ms. Roediger?
Well, yeah, as the Planning Commission, we tend to hold the first Tuesday of the month for a special meeting if possible, but we'll have to make sure people are available to meet quorum. But that would be the date we would look at, the first Tuesday of August.
First Tuesday of August. Okay. All right, so if we miss on this, we'll come say hello.
Okay.
Thank
Which
you.
would be
Yes.
August 3rd. If people are available. Yeah.
Yes, as long as we can bring a quorum together, but we usually sort of hold that first day open for circumstances like this. Okay, then, I have a motion by Mr. Kalsunas, seconded by Mr. Hooper to postpone the Grace Senior Living Facility until they come back with updated plans. Take a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Okay, good luck, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Okay, I guess I am going to move on to any other business. And Ms. Roediger, do you have any other business tonight?
We do not, no.
Okay, is there anyone else that has any other business tonight?
Chairperson Brnovic.
Mr. Kalsunas.
I'd like to wish everybody a good holiday, a good 4th of July, and I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, do I have a second? Okay, Ms. Neubauer. And I'm sure we're all aware of it, but just to mention again, our next scheduled meeting is July 20th. So I have a motion by Mr. Kalsunas, seconded by Ms. Neubauer for adjournment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Everyone have a safe trip home. Good night.
Okay. Now,